Happy Friday, everybody. It's a Buckeye Friday because we've got prospects in town this weekend, high school prospects on official visits. We'll talk about that later. But first, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe button, punch it, whatever. Dan, I never remember what it is.
Smash. You got the
Smash it,
kids.
smash the like
The
button.
kids say
Man,
smash it.
Dan's older than me, and I still don't get it. So whatever. But welcome to Dave. Appreciate you jumping on our pod. You probably already have seen the Alabama logo and wondered what in the heck are we doing. Well, we have Dave from the Alabama podcast. I think you're the original oldest pod. Tell us about your pod, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be on with you guys and talk some ball. I think we've got some pretty cool topics to talk about today. But look, time goes by faster, and if you don't have a measuring stick, you don't believe things. This will be our 15th season, which is amazing. We started. It was a buddy and I. We would talk football all the time, and I was looking for an Alabama football podcast, and I couldn't really find one. And it sort of clicked in my head. I want to listen to people have the conversation that we're having, and I couldn't find that. So I said, well, let's just go create one. And so we did that together for quite a number of years. Life events, his children and whatnot. He had to sort of step away. And so I've been carrying the water the last couple of years. It's a lot of fun. It's a different dynamic with just one person, but it's a lot of fun. We focus primarily. Our point of origin has been post game reviews, and so what did we see? What do we think the implications are as we move forward in the season based on what we're seeing? I really enjoy the player rotations and the formations. And Saban used to talk about, and at first I kind of wasn't sure, but I've sort of grown to love the idea of there's not 11 starters. There might be 17 starters based on, formations. And so looking at what's the rotation when we change formations, what's the two deep across that 17, right? That's a lot of fun to look at. But we do post-game reviews, maybe what's the thing you didn't see that had an impact on the game. And we've gotten into the last couple of years pre-game interviews. People said, hey, why don't you do something pregame? Well, that's a lot of work to study an opponent, but we can bring an expert in. And we've been doing that the last couple of years, and that's been a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Cool. Yeah. That's great. I definitely understand wanting to hear the things that you're talking about. And that's kind of Dan and I. We always say we're a show by fans for fans, and I think that's why people like listening to us. To be honest, because we're just out there being fans, and we're not ashamed of it. So that's great, man. Yep. Appreciate you coming on.
Dave, I'm excited to have you on here. I've got to give a shout out to one of the biggest Alabama fans I know. Actually, two of them. My buddy Andy C. down in Atlanta, and then Wiley Short in Chattanooga. I think they might finally watch us today since we have you on here. But what's going on, fellas? I'm excited. I mean, I lived in SEC country since 2004. I was down in Atlanta for close to 15 years, Orlando for a couple of those years. And definitely, Roll Tide Roll is something you hear often in those neck of the woods. There's a lot of kids that went to Alabama living in Atlanta. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I have been too. I have a mystery topic too that I'll throw at you guys at the end of our segment, which I happened to think of after I shared our show notes. So, yeah. So one of the things, obviously, we're all of us Buckeye fans are really interested in, Dave, like extremely interested, is to get insight from you, who would have been doing. So you're doing player breakdowns, you're doing post game shows, you're talking about the things that are going on in Tuscaloosa. So what kind of, we're going to talk about Caleb Downs specifically first. What kind of kid is he? Quiet? Is he a leader? Just tell us about him as a person first and foremost. And if you guys don't want to hear about him as a person, fast forward.
No, I think, Caleb's a great kid. He really is. I'm old enough to call him kids. I say that on our show sometimes. I'm old enough to call him kids, whether I should or not. But Caleb really, he's a good kid, a hard worker. Under Saban, freshmen weren't allowed to do interviews. And so we didn't get to sort of see his personality like you do some other players sort of in the weekly press conferences. I think that's going to change, under DeBoer. But so we didn't see a lot of him sort of, face to camera. But definitely the stories, because everyone would ask, the reporters would ask, well, we talked about the guy that we can't get to talk to. And, to a man, they would talk about hard worker. He's always watching film. He's always asking questions. He's asking the right questions. He's learning. He knows it better than, he's teaching some of the other freshmen in terms of the schemes and such. And so he's definitely a hard worker. He puts in the time. He's not just athletically gifted, and we can talk about that, but he puts in the time, sort of the mental reps. And when you have the player that does both of those, together, then you have an opportunity for it to be something special. Of all the guys, and we can talk about the coaching transitions, of all the guys that left, and there were quite a number, and there's a number of them that I wish that we could have back. The cherry on top of the sundae, the name at the top of that list, and it doesn't matter whoever you ask across the Alabama fandom, it's Caleb Downs.
Okay. I was curious because he seems like especially with his family and the things that I've read, and I've not met his family, but they seem like very genuine, down to earth, thoughtful, considerate people. And I listening to the little bit that I did when Caleb I can remember that the night that I saw on Twitter that he committed to Ohio State. We had friends over and we were literally playing a board game, and I don't know, I don't play board games, but my wife made me play, and I jumped up. I was like, "We got Caleb Downs!" And my wife is like, what's happening? Why are you so excited? But he was the one guy like in the transfer portal that I was like, please give me that. So I get it. Dan, I know that you pay a lot of attention to things. Does that track with you? That seems like it. I mean, he's incredibly intelligent.
Oh yeah, no. I've been following Caleb probably since his freshman or sophomore year in high school. Just he was in that Mill Creek feeder system, and he went to Mill Creek High School, and they won a state championship his senior year against Buford, which is a national powerhouse. I don't know how to phrase this. I guess it's my ex-nephew. Was his position coach at Mill Creek. Now, because he was my ex, I didn't have a lot of communication with him, but my his cousin, my ex-stepson, I guess. It's so weird to say that. Would kind of relay stuff back and forth that he was hearing about him throughout the high school year, and got a lot of feedback too during the portal thing. The notion or the thought out there is that he was going to UGA.
A lot of people thought that.
I'm talking about in the portal, not his freshman year. It was well documented that we were a close second, or coming out of high school, but. There was a lot of people that thought he was going to be at UGA, and it was a no-brainer. And there was a rumor that he had already, signed an apartment lease and
had a lease and
all that other kind of stuff. We'll never know, but it's fun to talk about, right? But I mean, Buckeye Nation was on fire when that was happening, and it was almost kind of too like, really, this world just kind of finally impacted us. This is kind of crazy.
You guys, in terms of the portal and Caleb Downs, you guys were the necessary evil. And I say that because we thought he was going to Georgia too, and we thought he and Justice Hayes were gonna go to Georgia, and that was gonna be the apocalypse. And so Justice stayed and Downs left, but he didn't go to Georgia. And so again, you guys were the necessary evil in that regard.
Now I've got a question for you. So I was in a Spaces. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Twitter Spaces. I usually spend about 90 seconds in there, and then I'm like, I can't handle all this.
I can't believe you still go in there, man. I don't know how you do it without losing your ever-loving mind.
Like I said, it's usually 90 seconds. Yeah. I was pleasantly surprised. There was a guy named Jay a couple weeks ago that was the moderator, and he would mute people if they started talking over each other and yelling. And it was actually a really good conversation. It was a lot of fun. But he made a comment that Caleb was before Saban even left, that Caleb was kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot out. I didn't get a chance to expand on that. That call went pretty late, and it was time for me to go to bed. But is there any
It was 8:30.
Do you have anything to contribute to that, or?
I had not heard that rumor, and I would my instinct would be to debunk it. There have been players that maybe because Saban didn't play a lot of freshmen. He would play freshmen, but he wouldn't play a lot. And we've always had guys that maybe didn't feel like they were getting their fair opportunity, and then they would want to leave. And you think, gosh, if you just stayed one more year, you were set up to be the starter. But he was the starter. He was the day one starter. He led the team in tackles. I mean, it was phenomenal what he was contributing. And so when you think of, I don't want to say elite, but when you think of like the inner circle of, the top of the mountain college football programs, and you're a starter for one of those teams and a prolific starter for one of those teams, why would you leave? Where would you go? And so I think the coaching change maybe precipitated some of that, and so he went to another sort of inner circle program, right? But I don't. I heard no inklings that he was already a foot out the door. That doesn't mean it's not true. It just means, gosh, that would be so much harder to believe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the one and only place that I'd ever heard it.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, I hadn't either. Especially with Saban there. I mean, Saban's a defensive back guru.
Yeah.
You know, I got a chance. I coached high school football in 2010 and 11 in Georgia, so I was going to all the AFCA coaching clinics, the Glazier clinics, and all that stuff, and they always hosted them in Atlanta. And Saban led a session one time, and it was just, I mean, it was standing room only. It was basically in a ballroom. And he was talking about his coverages and everything else like that on the back end of the defense. And he's just Goodwill Hunting, wicked smart when it comes to that kind of stuff. So to think about leaving a guy like that, I was a little surprised to hear that comment. Having said that, Chad, can I bring the heat now or?
Yeah, I would. So I was just next question. My next question was really.
We're talking about Caleb. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, my next question was, what type of player is he? What can we expect from him? And I was off on a little tangent about like I was thinking about the amount of respect I have for Nick Saban because he coached with Bill Belichick for the Browns in the early 90s. And I just remember his trajectory. Another one's Mark D'Antonio and Bill Belichick. Like, you think about those three guys. Like, it might be the only smart thing that Mark Modell ever did, but he hired Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. So
I like to joke that we currently have two coaches, former Ohio State coaches, nominated for the College Football Hall of Fame: Urban Meyer and Nick Saban.
Yeah, same thing. There you go. But yeah, you can bring your question, Dan. I was just curious, Dave. Like, obviously he's intelligent, he's fast, he plays well. We know, but I'm curious about his coverage skills because, and I didn't put this in notes, it was in my head. The way that Jim Knowles has a safety driven defense, and a lot of times, he'll put a safety on an island. We saw it with Lathan Ransom in the Peach Bowl a couple years ago. So what are we getting in Caleb Downs, just for people that aren't like in it like we are all the time with football?
Yeah, I think, if you paint with a broad stroke, when you put a safety on an island, you're doing that as a risk, right? They're not the corners, right? If they were superior 101, then they play on the outside, and so they kind of they play in the middle and whatnot. I don't say that to say he can't do it or he can't do it in spots or situationally. It just depends on what the defense is going to call for. Alabama's going to put players in 101 positions, and he did okay. Now, you could reason he led the team in tackles because maybe he was targeted in some regard, but he's also a true freshman, and so you got to factor that into the equation as well. I think he's going to be better than serviceable in sort of coverage like that. But I wouldn't build a defense around that. He's very athletic, very instinctive, reacts to the ball. But in a 101 man situation, that's a different mentality that a player has to have. I'm not saying that he doesn't have it or can't evolve into it, but that was not the feature that he brought to the defense at Alabama last season.
I don't think he needs to with our defensive backfield. To be, you have Denzel Burke, Davis Igbinosun, and Jordan Hancock. All three are, probably going to be All-Americans this year. So I don't think he has to, but Jim Knowles does have a safety-driven defense. So Dave or Dan, I teed you up, man.
You did. So here's my question: Is Caleb Downs overrated?
Yeah, and I'm going to Josh Payton. Yeah, I'm going to say, what's he rated, right?
Well, let me clarify.
Go ahead.
Is that everybody? I mean,
99.
The national stage, the national pundits, the national guys on these channels, they universally refer to him as the maybe the best player in college football, after saying he's the best defensive player in college football. And I'm like, well, wait a minute here. He just finished a true freshman season, I don't think he made first team All-American, and there's guys coming back ahead of him that were first team All-Americans. He just got named on Phil Steele's second team All-American preseason team. So what, if people are considering him the best defensive player, maybe the best overall player in all of college football, is he overrated based on that?
Well, if that's the rating, then yes. If you say, is he going to be the best defender in college football next year, I would bet against that. There's a percent chance that that could be true, but I would bet against that from an odds perspective. If you were to say, hey, is he going to be Ohio State's best defender next year? Well, I don't study your roster. I would say probably not. If you said, is he going to be a top 3 to 5 defender? Yeah, he's going to be one of your top 3 to 5 defenders, and that's going to be a pretty good player. At Alabama last year, leading tackler, and it wasn't close. He had 70 solo tackles. Next up was 40. He had 107 total tackles. Next up was 67. I mean, he's lapping the field in tackles at Alabama, and Alabama is known for defense. Saban's known for defense, and so those are incredible numbers. Whatever you want to say about the guy, he still put them up. He had 3 pass deflections. He had 2 interceptions, and damn it, he almost had one more against the guys that you wish he had it against. He had a forced fumble, and he had an 85-yard, punt return for a touchdown. So athletically and instinctively, he's there. He's Minka Fitzpatrick. They play a little bit different positions, but in terms of having freshman impact in the secondary, that's the level that Alabama fans look at him as. So, again, overrated. Like if the media is trying to just outdo the next guy with a level of praise, then that sort of topples over under its own weight. But if you realistically look at it and say, how good can this guy be? Oh, he can have a significant impact in your secondary. And I predict that he will. He can have a significant impact on, your program this season.
Okay. There were quite a few. You already talked about the fact that if he's on an island defending, that he might not be the strongest link there. He's an incredible athlete, so he can recover better than a lot of guys. But there were a lot of things on film last year. Now, I always take this stuff at the beginning of the year with a grain of salt, especially with a true freshman. But our rivals up north, they sure like to post some clips of him getting handled in that semifinal game. And what do you attribute that to? I mean, there were, I'm talking mainly about the plays where he didn't seem to be able to get off a block.
Strength.
Yeah, I think Michigan was a lot more physical, getting after the secondary than maybe what he was used to, maybe what we've seen. Michigan was, and you guys are going to know this even better than I do, but they were an upperclassman-led field, and so you've got guys years in the weight room, years under a physical style of play under Harbaugh, and I think they went out and said, hey, this Alabama team is physical, but we're gonna hit them in the mouth, and we're gonna go toe to toe with them. And they were a uniquely positioned team. Georgia could have done it, Texas did it, Michigan did it. There were just a handful of teams that were equipped to do that, and Michigan was one. And target the freshmen. And I think I don't want to minimize it happened, but does that mean he's a liability? I would say no. Definitively. Not whimsically, but definitively, no, he's not a liability. He will be a strength. Is there the sophomore slump? Is it adapting to the new scheme? All of those are real, but no, he's going to be a contributor on your defense. It's. I don't envision, unless barring injury, I don't envision him not being one of your favorite defenders.
Yeah, Dave, you brought something up that.
And I think that. Sorry, are we on a lag?
We might be. I apologize. Go ahead, Dan.
That's all right. I was just going to say, the expectation is for him to be, an instant high impact contributor. All reports out of camp is that his IQ is just off his football IQ is just off the charts. I mean, Jim Knowles joked that, Caleb interviewed him harder than Ryan Day interviewed him when he was hired as a defensive coordinator. So, I think when you have that skill level that he has and that talent that he has, and you combine it, once those two things finally meet in the middle, I think you can have a Minka Fitzpatrick type of a guy.
Yeah, he's a 3-year guy. I'm just,
Oh yeah.
again, barring injury, he's a 3-year guy. In my mind, I still wrestle. Why would you leave? And I'm biased, right? I've got the shirt on. Why would you leave Alabama? And and I don't mean that against Ohio State. You guys would say the same thing. Why would you leave if you're not just a player, not just on the team, but a star contributor as a true freshman? Like, what's better than that? And the coaching transition, whatever it is, he made that decision. But you guys are getting, of all the guys who left, and there's a handful that I wish hadn't left. He's at the top of the list, and Alabama fans, unilaterally, if you were to poll Bama fans, it would be Caleb Downs.
Yeah,
you guys got it. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're excited.
Quietly, I will cheer for him.
So I have my question, Dave. There's two of them. The first one is going to be around him returning punts, but you hit on something that actually, Dan, you'll be familiar with this show, Rothman and Ice. They were basically talking about how Michigan had these like 23, 24, 25-year-old grown men playing against like 18, 19, and 20-year-old kids. Dave, you just hit on that with Caleb Downs. If you put, the amount of time in the weight room, if you think about an 18-year-old kid and a 22-year-old guy, like the amount of time in the weight room and the strength that you gain in your early 20s is insane. So yeah, I'm not holding that against him. But so Caleb Downs is a punt returner, and then Ryan Day floated the idea, and I hated this. It really made me mad, of playing him on offense, because I hate gimmick offense stuff, because then the defense just keys on that guy. And maybe a decoy works every once in a while, but I've seen it. The only time I've ever seen it really work well was like with Chris Gamble, maybe Desmond Howard, where they played on offense and defense a lot, enough to where like it was a consistent thing. And that now you got a Buckeye fandom going crazy saying, "Oh, is Caleb Downs going to be third on the team in carries in the backfield?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, here we go." So, right. But tell me about Caleb punt returns, and then we can shift to Seth McLaughlin, because I have some questions about him too.
Yeah, I have a sort of a philosophy that I have, and even our listeners think I'm crazy sometimes, maybe more than sometimes. But your marquee player, like if you were to put out the marquee and like who's the guy, mm-hmm. That guy at a position, don't have them return punts and kicks.
Thank you.
I just last year we did it with Kool-Aid McKinstry, and like he was this one of the star cornerbacks, and he's a good punt returner, but I would rather not risk him at a punt returner position for what he brings to the defense. Now, if you're the third corner or the second rotation corner, go for it. Mm-hmm. Go for it, because mm-hmm. the risk. We would run this opinion is aged in my mind. We would run end arounds with Julio Jones. And I'd like, why? Of course he's talented, but why? Because he's the marquee player. If he gets tackled and injured on an end around, it's not the risk reward isn't there. And he would score touchdowns. And I'd say, I still don't like that play. And so when we think about, Caleb Downs, could he do it? Oh, absolutely. And what's funny is last season, Kool-Aid was really struggling returning kicks. And so, and we had a game, and it was against a lesser opponent. I think it was UT Chattanooga. And Kool-Aid was just getting loose, but couldn't break one. And then we put another player back there, and he ran one back for a touchdown. And we put Caleb Downs there, and he ran one back for a touchdown. And Kool-Aid never kind of got his moment, but Caleb did. And so, athletically, could he do it? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. He can return punts. And is it a bad option? No, it's not maybe the decision that I would make, but it's certainly something that you could do. Now, if you said that you wanted to put him at like a slot receiver, for 6 routes a game, fine, knock yourself out. To put him at running back, man, that's a mighty physical position. And, we've talked about, even though he's secondary, 70 solo tackles. So he's a physical defender, and you put him in a physical offensive position. I just think like, God, how many games would a season have? 16, 17 games if you go all the way, right? Like, is he going to be, would a player, not just Caleb, but would any player be durable enough to stand up to that workload? And I'd probably say no. And so I don't know that I would play him at running back, but I don't know, maybe slot every once in a while.
I think they're going to pick and choose him. I mean, you look at his high school tape as a running back, man. It's like his brother tweeted, like, y'all haven't seen him with the ball in his hands, have you? You know, those that are saying don't do it. You know, I'm kind of old school in the sense that get the ball in the hands of your best players. Now, with our running back room and as deep as it is with the two guys we have at the top, do I think that means offense for Caleb Downs? No, like you said, maybe, you know, throw him out in the slot and let him run some patterns. The punt return thing, on the other hand, I'm all for it. And you got to understand, we're going on close to 7 generations that we haven't returned a punt or a kickoff for a touchdown. So, I mean, it's been, I think, what, 2007? 2010 since Jalen Marshall was the last one to return a kick?
Jalen Marshall had one, Dan. Jalen Marshall had one
in
Marshall, 2014 or 2015.
He was 2014, 15. Yeah, but it's been that long. Yeah. So, you know, that's why you've got a lot of the folks on the Ohio State side clamoring for just put somebody back there that can actually make something happen. You look at the Woodsons and the, you know, the Howards and, you know, those guys all returned punts.
Yeah. If he does it for the season, I mean, 2 or 3, I guess I'd put the over under at 2.5. I don't know. But he'll return 2 or 3. I mean, you know, and again, I'm not saying he won't be good at it. I'm just saying, God, there's a mighty big risk. If he is truly one of our top 1 or 2 defenders, then for me, it's sort of a risk thing. But if you isolate it and say, look, he's not going to get hurt, how good can he be? Oh, yeah, he returns multiples.
Yeah. I'm here for it.
I just remember the Browns putting Kellen Winslow on kickoffs, and he blew his knee out like early in his rookie year. And I was so mad. I'm like, why is your top pick getting hurt on special teams? But oh well. So I'm going to shift now, Dave, because the guy that I love Caleb Downs, but tell me about Seth McLaughlin. I know he had the yips in the game, in the playoff game, or the SEC championship, but tell me about Seth.
Yeah, go ahead. What was all about that?
Yeah, I think Seth McLaughlin. I'll tell you what, and I'm on record. It's on our podcast, right? You could poll 100 Alabama fans about Seth McLaughlin, and I'll be the one person that sort of pulls the other direction. Those other 99 fans rented the truck, helped him pack, loaded, moved him into his apartment in Columbus. They were ready to see him go, and I take a significantly different stance on Seth McLaughlin. I'm not surprised that he left, and probably in the scheme of things, it needed to happen. I just think he needs a fresh start, new environment. Sometimes that can really pay off. But I absolutely 100% hate it. I hate it. I think he deserves better from Tide fans, and he's a player that I will openly root for, for you guys. My story on Seth McLaughlin, he's a hard worker. He came in sort of undersized, wasn't really going to get an opportunity, and he built himself up into a player that competed. The rug was pulled out from him multiple times, and all he did is get back up and scrap and re-win the starting position. He has 25 starts in his career, but he started seasons. He started in 3 different seasons. 2021. He started when Darian Dalcourt was struggling and maybe a little dinged up. And he started at the end of the season against Georgia in the SEC championship, against Cincinnati in the playoff, and then against Georgia in the national title again. And the line was demonstratively better with Seth under center than it was Darian Dalcourt. And so I went into the 22 season predicting the 2 deep would have Seth at the starter at center, and we didn't do that. We brought Darian Dalcourt back. Darian's a bigger guy, about 30, 40 pounds bigger, stronger, more time in the system, and I think maybe a coach's favorite. And so Dalcourt started in 2022. We struggled. The offensive line struggled in 22, and I point back to the Texas game where we had issues in the A gaps, and so we couldn't stop a nosebleed in the A gaps. And so that next week, we moved Dalcourt out and put Seth back in. and the level of play across the entire offensive line went up. Last year we had the best two, arguably the best two guards in college football, and that's a form and function of the center playing well. The line, dating back to 2021, the line played better, just more settled, more composed, with more confidence when Seth McLaughlin was in the game. Now, 21 and 22, the reports on him were he's good for one bad snap a game, but we'll take it for the elevated line play. In 2023, well, he had a lot more bad snaps. Now, he started every game all season, 14 games. Just a side note, the coaches were so in love with Darien Dalcourt that they started him at guard, and he got beat at that position. So he beat out Darien Dalcourt 3 times over 3 years, and the level of play with Seth over Dalcourt. And Dalcourt was picked. He's in an NFL camp, so he's not that he can't play. He's just there's something at that center position that Seth brings that Darien didn't. And if you ran him through the underwear Olympics, Darien's the better player. But on the field, inexplicably, Seth is the better player. And so I'm really sort of doubling down. I love this kid. I really, really do. Now, you could say his snaps cost us against Michigan. You could say his snaps cost us against Texas, and I won't argue that. I think those are fair positions. And in the crucible of competition, it's those moments that sort of paint who you are. I think sometimes unfairly, but I'm gonna pound the table, stand on the desk, and wave the flag for Seth McLaughlin being a high character player, an incredibly hard worker. I don't know what your line sort of situation is, and so is he gonna step in as a starter? I don't know. Is he gonna come and compete his ass off every single day, and whether he starts or not, make players around him better? Is Ohio State a better team for having him? Absolutely, yes. 100%.
Yeah, okay. So we had a redshirt freshman start at center last year, Carson Hinsman, and he rolled out with the ones to start spring practice. But by the time spring practice was over, Seth was starting at center, and I think the assumption is that he'll be the starter. It's interesting to hear that the snap issue wasn't just against Michigan, because that's the narrative.
Yeah, it was the narrative.
No.
So I didn't realize it was something. That's the narrative in Buckeye Nation. You always kind of want to gloss over the warts, but so you're saying that was more than a one game type thing?
Yeah, it was. He had his worst performances last season were against Michigan, and of course the stage, right? Everyone sees that. But against Texas too, much earlier in the season. And I think there's a correlation. The strong, physical, dominating interior defensive lineman. He's our offensive line was bigger than some NFL lines last year. And he had to eat a sandwich to get above 300 pounds. And so our average was really, really high, and he was pulling it down. It was so much, I think he was 298, 299, 305. Darien Dalcourt, easily is 330, 335, 340. And so they wanted the big guy in there, and just, it just didn't work out. And so McLaughlin was in there. And, the rub on that is the bigger, more physical interior defensive linemen are going to have the upper hand. And they did. And that's where he would struggle. With his snaps. There was some reporting. I don't know what you guys heard. I heard that that Ryan Day was saying, well, it was Milrose, signaling.
That was my next question.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that. I think that I think it's on Seth. And you've heard me talk effusively about the guy. I love him. But I think it was on him. There were some reports that he entered last season with a hurt wrist. I don't know. I kind of, played it off that way because he had so many more bad snaps last year than before. Could it be a collage of factors? Yeah, that's probably where the truth generally lives. But it wasn't just that game. It wasn't just Milroe. Dating back a couple of years, again, I said in 2021 and 22, he overtook the guy to take over the starting position, but he was still good for a bad snap a game.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question, Dave.
I mean, I like the upgrade for us. Sorry, Chad. I didn't know if we were going to have you on there or not, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not sure why that keeps fading in and out. I really don't, because my internet has not changed. But Dave, can Seth return punts?
I mean, clearly no, but like he'll be the first in line to say, "Coach, if that's what you need me to do," and
Yeah.
obviously you don't want him to do that, but you love that spirit and that mentality. If he's the guy that's going to be at the top of the line, and I don't mean this negative against your roster. I'm just waving Seth's flag. Whatever you need, Coach. Whatever you need. That's Seth. That's Seth.
Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, he definitely looks like the elder statesman on the offensive line.
Yeah.
That is a hairline joke right there.
Yes.
He looks like he belongs in the Midwest, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Maybe in a backroom poker game with some polka playing in the back.
That's right. Yeah.
So Dave,
I root for him. I mean, I want Caleb to do well. I'm not mad at any of the guys, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned how much you were bummed about Caleb Downs, that he was at your top of your list of the guys who left. And so I kind of wanted to transition to Julian Sayin.
Yeah, no, I'm going to Chad, we're getting like every fifth word from you, buddy. So I'm just going to kind of trog through here with Dave until we can get that straightened out. So, transitioning over to Julian Sayin.
Yeah.
Well, one last question on Seth McLaughlin.
Yeah.
I heard that, he left before Saban announced. So I heard that Saban really fought to keep him there. Is that?
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's going to be. I think that's going to be factual. I think Seth, and this is where I just hate it, and this is where I don't think he got a fair treatment from Alabama fans, because they don't look at the whole picture. They just look at a moment in time. As bad as that moment in time is, there is a bigger picture. And so social media, and I'm not trying to get on some platform, but social media can sometimes be brutal. And sports fans can be the worst of the worst in a social media setting. And so, bad snaps against Michigan, Alabama loses in overtime. Well, whose fault is it? It's this guy. And so we're going to run him up the rails on social media. And I just think that's where I think he probably needed to go. As much as I hate it and the circumstances and every ounce of it I hate, I acknowledge he probably did need to leave. Because I just think he needed a fresh restart. I just couldn't imagine at my age, much less at his age, how challenging that would be to stick around for another year of that, when I can go somewhere else and kind of have a clean slate. I hate that it happened. I hate how it happened. I hate that he's not on our team. I understand it, and he's one guy that I'll actively root for. I mean, I hope Caleb goes on and has a good time. I hope Jalen or Sayin goes on and has a good time. But Seth, I'll actively root for him.
Yeah. Well, let's transition over to the last one that we poached from you guys. Thank you, Nick Saban. Julian Sayin. I mean, it was a fleeting, it was a summer romance.
Yep.
type with him, right? He was there for a couple weeks. Do you think the only reason he came to Ohio State is because O'Brien was hired there for that brief moment, or do you think he would have went without O'Brien? And then what? Also, how excited were you for him him coming into the fold, and how disappointed were you that he left?
I think it's an interesting thing with Sayin. It's hard to miss what you didn't have. And so I think of it in those terms. He did participate in some. He was on board. He was an early enrollee. He participated in practices for the playoffs, and so he was bought in. And I think that, and then the reports were all positive. Of course, they're going to be positive. Anytime you bring in, I'll say it this way: like anytime you bring in, we're in the South, you guys are in the Midwest, right? So we probably share maybe a thought process here. Man, you bring in a 5-star quarterback from California, that just sounds sexy, right? But That's like the guy in high school that says, my girlfriend I know from my youth group at church. Like, what does that mean? That could be a fabrication. That could be nothing. And so, like, we didn't know what we had. We were just excited, about the potential of what it was. And it's fun and it's an exciting sort of recruiting story, and then having him on board. So there's a lot of excitement about it. I think a lot of fans just say, oh, well, he never played for us, so we weren't that invested other than the good time sort of summer fling. And so he goes on and does what he does. Oh, well, I think the narrative is just a little bit deeper than that. And and this is just a hunch, but I think it has a lot to do with, I think it has a whole lot to do. Like, I think this is the answer. I think it has to do with Caleb DeBoer bringing Austin Mack from Washington. And the backstory on Austin Mack is that Kalen and the coaching staff at Washington had him reclassify, and so he did 3 years in high school, and then went to Washington. They had him reclassify, and so it's kind of like the devil, you know. We have trained this quarterback. We saw so much potential in him that we had him reclassify, and we think he's a year in our system. We'd rather have this guy, and so as soon as that happened, like the next day or day after, as soon as Austin Mack announced that he was coming to Alabama, that's when Sayin left. And I kind of, in my mind, I thought, yeah, this is going to go that way. It's predictable. You can see it, right? You're hand choosing who you're bringing over, and it's a guy that you've previously hand chosen. Like, I'm not going to go wait in that line. And I'm going to go somewhere else where I had also a good time in recruiting, and I also think I can be highly successful. And I don't begrudge him that at all.
Was Austin Mack? He's a incoming freshman, right? Or did I understand that?
No, he'll be a redshirt. He'll be a redshirt freshman.
Okay,
he was on the Washington team last year.
Okay, he had a year in their system already. Interesting. Yeah, I mean that. Yeah. You know, that makes sense. I mean, you see it in the NFL all the time, right? When there's a coaching regime, change, the staff, you bring in a new staff, you bring in new players. And we're going to dive into, the state of the union down there in the South before this is over today. But in regards to Julian, I mean, have you paid attention to the spring hype that he got?
I did not. I heard that he did okay. I remember hearing what the numbers were. I couldn't quote them back to you.
There really weren't a lot of numbers that were shared. That's actually a sore subject with me in regards to the quarterback battle. Apparently,
yeah, don't get dead on that one. Don't get it on that one.
That's a whole nother podcast. But so Julian came in. Everybody was stoked. He was a 5-star. We had Aaron Nolan, another 5-star that had been with us for a long time and stuck with us, throughout the recruiting process. Julian came in, and he. The reports are he's just a natural thrower. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty consistent when you talk to players behind the scenes, you talk to coaches behind the scenes. He had the best accuracy and ball placement out of all 5 of them. He's just still really slight of frame, and he's 18 years old, maybe. But what happened is that in the spring wrap up, or maybe halfway through the spring, Ryan Day had a press conference. And he was being Ryan Day, which means he was being very cliche and mundane with what he was saying. And he made the comment that all the quarterbacks were still in the mix. And then 5 minutes later, there was a follow-up question. And he specifically talked about Julian, being in the mix. And then 5 minutes later, there was a follow-up question. And somebody said, well, what would need to happen for Julian to be able to play? And Ryan said, well, he would need, Julian's going to need to be ready for Oregon and Penn State and Michigan and things like that. And so everyone took that snippet of Julian's going to need to be ready to play and they disregarded the question 5 minutes later that said he was in the mix and what the real question was to that answer. And, things blew up. And, if the backup quarterback's the most popular guy on the team, then the incoming 5-star freshman is going to be even more popular than him. So yeah, I mean his persona blew up in the spring, and we're excited to have him. But I mean he needs to get a lot stronger before he's ready for a grind like this.
Yeah, you almost don't want. I mean, you want to have the best incoming freshman quarterback that you can have. But at the same time, you don't want him to have to start, And so, I'm glad we got him. But man, year 2, he's going to be awesome.
Yeah, not on this team. I mean, we're loaded, with the guys that are coming back. You talked about Michigan being a senior-laden team. We're basically the same story this year.
Yeah.
In regards to that, Chad, you back with us?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. I have no idea what was going on. So.
All right. Well, we've got through Julian. Moving on, we mentioned that Saban retired. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on down there. How you guys feeling about DeBoer?
A lot of excitement. a lot of excitement. There was, there was the, there were, January 10th, right, is the day that we knew was coming, just not when. And so when it happened, but I think Alabama executed the concern was, do we botch the hire? Because we've botched hires before. And so how do we not botch the hire? And so I think we hit a home run on the hire. Kalen DeBoer, I think, is a phenomenal coach. You get one of the other coaches from one of the four, national title teams. You're getting somebody that's pretty good. And, his resume is pretty dang impressive.
Yep.
The biggest thing, I mean, there's a lot of big things. I think he's come in, he's done a media tour, and he's said all the right things, and he appears to be doing all of the right things. It's a challenging situation to come into, and of course, the transfer portal, that was no fun. That was like being locked in stocks in town square, and people throwing tomatoes at you, people coming to get our players, and I'm looking at you guys too. But but Kalen's come in and he's done all the right things. I think he's hired a really good staff. He's, all these balls that he was juggling at the beginning, he's hired a really good staff. He finished out the 24 recruiting class really strong. He's tearing up. Saban was always a slow player in the recruiting. A year out, we would have 3 guys at this point, and we've got 13 or 14, whatever it is. We're the 3rd ranked recruiting class, and so we seem to be doing really well in that regard. Spring, the offense looked. I think it looked pretty good. There's some work to do there, but there's a lot of excitement. There's a little bit of a reset of expectations, which is really to say to temper them. Alabama, right, wrong, or indifferent, had a decade plus run where just every year we expected to win the national title, which is grueling. It's a grind for fans as well as it is for the team. And I think there's a little bit of like exhale, like, hey, the world hasn't fallen apart. We've got a really good guy. He's going to be, whatever we think that he can be. And the biggest, like just a little note that I'll add to it is that we hired the best guy that I think one of the top 2 that was available, that we could have hired. We did it within 48 hours, which is, an incredible amount of turnaround. There was no sort of sloppy, someone saying no or whatever. It was Kalen DeBoer. It was always Kalen DeBoer. And we didn't bend over backwards to hire a Saban disciple and then sort of be beholden to that idea. We hired the best available guy, and we think we got a really good one. And I'll take it a step further. Even if he doesn't work out, we're free from the chain. Alabama chased Bear Bryant for 20 years. If you had a cup of coffee with Bear Bryant, you were a candidate for the job. And we broke the Saban chain with DeBoer such that even if he's not successful, we'll next time go for the best guy again. We won't look for the next disciple. And I think that's in Alabama culture and Alabama lore. I think that is meaningful. You might listen to that and say, well, that's just silly. Of course you always go get the best guy. But man, we had generations where we didn't.
No, you had generations where you didn't, and you guys escaped by the skin of your teeth from the ultimate botched hire, which was Rich Rod.
Oh man, yes. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Oh man.
I'm glad that didn't.
Now, my alma mater, I actually went to the University of Arizona. So when we got Rich Rod out there, that was awesome for the U of A. It was great. And he kind of, he did all right. He underachieved. But so help me understand. I mean, all reports are is that Saban is still really, really present around there. Is that true?
I think it's an overstatement to, that he's around. He has an office in the stadium, but it's not in the athletic building. He's not down the hall from DeBoer. He's down the street, which I think, there's a level of separation there. I think that the coach's name escapes me all of a sudden, but DeBoer has done that before. Washington had sort of a coaching emeritus that was on campus, that was down the hall. And Kalen DeBoer,
Don James, I think it was, wasn't it?
I'm thinking Chris Peterson.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's lived with that coach sort of in the building, and his personality and his aura still sort of floating around, the building. And so he's done that before, and he was his own man at Washington. He is his own man at Alabama. If we had brought a Saban sort of protege, disciple, and then Saban was in the building, man, they like that coach would be down there all the time, and DeBoer's like doing his thing. They leverage Saban, they use him as a reference, but man, every photo I've seen of Saban, he's growing a beard, he's out playing golf, he's on the boat with his wife, he's in wherever they're doing the NFL draft. I've not seen a picture of him in Tuscaloosa. That doesn't mean he's not there. It just means that like the reports might be that he's heavy-handed. No, that is it's just nothing could be further from the truth in that regard.
It's interesting because there was a report that came out after an official visit. We're both going after Justin Hill big time right now, a kid out of Winton Woods in Cincinnati. And he just had his official visit down there in Tuscaloosa, and he referenced meeting Saban and spending some time with him.
Yeah, look, go ahead.
No, that's I was just wondering if is he meeting the recruits? Like,
yeah, I think so. I think so. Again, I don't want to contradict myself. He is not lording over the program. Does from his house in Jupiter, Florida, did he fly up for the weekend just like the recruits did? And then here's our trophy case, and like here's the GOAT. Shake his hand and get a picture, right? I think I don't want to say he's being used as like a dog and pony act, but he's not driving. He's not driving the program. He's available to support the program. And I think if you had someone like that in that capacity, most coaches, when they're replaced, they're being run out of town. And that this is a unique case where that's not true. And so I think it would almost be foolish. Now, are we still doing this like 4 years from now? Well, that would be foolish. But to take advantage of it sort of right now, where Saban has been recruiting some of these players. Saban was the head coach recruiting some of these players. And so why not leverage that, that pre-existing relationship as part of the process? I think we're doing it in that regards, in that capacity. But, it's DeBoer's program.
Nice. Well, I mean, it's a smart thing to do to keep Saban around, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why? Like you just said, I mean, why not? He's got an aura to him. He's got a presence to him. I mean, I would be doing film study with Saban, every week.
Yeah.
I would do a film review, a film review of the last game, and a film review of the upcoming opponent. If he's there, use him.
Is he going to work for ESPN
but
now?
DeBoer, I mean. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's gonna. I don't know exactly what capacity is he going to be on the desk for game day, or I probably I don't know. But yeah, he's definitely cashing ESPN checks.
Great, cool.
He'll be on game day. They said he'll be on the set full time.
Okay,
perfect.
Chad, it sounds like we got you back, buddy.
Yeah, I'm back. I wanted to do like a quick snippet, Dave. I don't want to keep you too long. I know Dan's got a hustle today too. So for NIL, when I think about like top tier NIL teams, obviously you have Ohio State, Oregon, Bama, Georgia, Texas. I was curious, is Alabama going forward with their state-of-the-art NIL center? I saw, I guess it was maybe a year and a half ago, it was all the rage, and people in Columbus started freaking out. We need that too. So I know you're not like, the NIL isn't really where you live. You're more on the player side, but I was just curious, how's the NIL, what's the landscape in Tuscaloosa? What's that look like, at a real high 30,000 foot level?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of everyone wants to have sort of the new sort of shiny object in NIL space, the new idea that we can implement and sort of put into place. And they have something that we don't, so we have to have it. I think there's a lot of that. The Alabama sort of collective is school sponsored. You can go look and see some schools have multiple collectives. So that just seems like not a good idea. And so this is a school sponsored. We call it Yay Alabama, which is the name of our fight song. So that's kind of cool. There's a neat little logo they have. There's a little bit, and NIL's a sort of, I don't know, slippery slope topic, right? Mm-hmm. There's the piece of NIL that just says give the players money, and I don't care for that. That's not really what it is. That's not what name, image, likeness is. Like if you want to go do a commercial and make money, man, hats off, because that's what it is. Make some money from your reputation. But here's money to come to our team. I think we need some regulation around that. And so, but we all do it, right? Because we can. And so it's the new sort of competitive landscape. So I don't like it, but it is what it is. We don't have like the stable of Lambos like Texas has, and we don't have the Nike money like Oregon does. What's that? Yeah. And so, but this center, I think they call it, the Alabama advantage, which all of a sudden that sounds like, well, we got to have, insert school advantage. And we do call it an NIL center, and it's in the stadium. They sort of built it into the stadium, and it's a couple of things, and it's probably more than what I understand it to be, but it's a couple of things that anyone can do, and probably a lot of schools even are. There's like a podcast studio where the players can come in and record a podcast, or they can hop on with someone like this. I've been approached, hey, would you like to have X player on your podcast, and it costs X $100, every week for them to be, on your show. And I've always declined that because that exceeds my budget. But this is a place where they could go do that, and maybe even create, their own podcast and license it and brand it. And so, it's the forum that they have available to truly do an NIL type activity or behavior. There's a sound stage where they could maybe record commercials. There's conference rooms where they could meet with prospective sponsors. And then the collective is not just forking over cash, but they're actively, not really as an agent, but as again, sort of operating as a collective, trying to seek out advertising opportunities for the players. And then here's some facilities that we're providing that you all can use to do that. And so that's like, if we were to strip it down to brass tacks, that's kind of what it is. There is a souvenir shop in the stadium that that sells merchandise, and then a proportion of that money goes into the NIL fund. And so rather than go to just a bookstore on the the strip or whatever, you can go there, and then you're contributing into. And then probably the coolest thing that I've seen, and other programs probably do this too, but if something happens, we had a couple players that came up with the Lank nomenclature last year, and so they started producing Lank T-shirts, and then sold those on behalf of the players, and so the players got the revenue. Isaiah Bond, he transferred to Texas, but he had that big catch against Auburn, and by the end of that week, there were T-shirts emblazoned with that catch, and he got a piece of that revenue, and some of it went to him, and some of it went into a pool for the team. And then I think Malachi Moore had a press conference with a quote, and now there's a T-shirt out there with it. And so these are things that are, I think, legitimate, authentic name, image, likeness opportunities that are very organic. And like, we can have T-shirts out by the end of the week if something happens on Saturday, sell them at the next game, and that benefits whoever the player is. I think that's cool. That's what it should be. And I'm sure other teams do stuff like that, can do that. I mean, imagine what Nike could do in that regard. But I just think that's a cool thing. We have it, and like I said, I'm sure other programs do too. I think it's a phenomenal idea in this NIL space.
Yeah. Ohio State's got something like that with the foundation. They've done an amazing job of connecting with the community and connecting with businesses. And, Columbus is the 6th largest city in the country. And there's a lot of, headquarters there. And, the Schottensteins are a huge family, and they own, all sorts, they just did a deal with Jamie French and Vernell Brown, as high school kids for American Eagle. They're one of the Schottensteins sits on the board as the chairman of the board for American Eagle. And then, they're really big into real estate and all that. But they've done a really good job of, and then they're setting up charters in certain strategic cities that have a huge alumni base to continually raise money. But to your point, we're not supposed to be paying players to come to school and play. But like you said, there's no guardrails right now, man. Right. So everybody's dipping into it. It's getting kind of crazy. That NIL center sounds really, really cool. And to your point, it's the spirit of the way this is supposed to work, right? Is to create name, image, and likeness opportunities. Now, one thing I got to ask you about this.
Yeah.
So the Lank thing, did that come from an Alabama player?
My understanding is yes. Let all naysayers know, the team is doubted. and so that's something that my understanding, Milrow and Terry and Arnold came up with that when they're in their dorm room or apartment, whatever, one night. And so they started using it. They got the big sort of chain made with it, and then they've used it as a motivation, but then also as a marketing thing. It's the first time. Now, if you're going to say, "Oh, well, someone did that 3 years ago," I won't dispute it. It's the first time I've ever heard it, and there was a lot of talk about the players sort of coming up with it in their dorm rooms.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that moment on game day this last year when Reese Davis said, Lank, let a naysayer know, and Pat McAfee jumped in. He's like, that's not what I thought it meant, but I was wondering.
I have said that on my.
Have we determined what it really means?
Well, I've said that on the podcast. I think there was a locker room bravado, Stephen L. Jackson version of what that probably was the original. Saban, and then so I'll counter oppose it, this way. No one has ever said that this is the edited version, right? But it just, your mind goes places. Saban's an old enough guy that a word like naysayer is in his vernacular.
Oh, yeah.
It's what he's going to say. And so when he talks to the team and the players say, Saban's always talking about getting on the naysayers, and so could it have started as one and ended as the other? That's where I put my money.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I heard is that Alabama's NIL is kind of a flat rate per player. And the number I heard was 300,000. And that, that's one of the things that rubbed Saban the wrong way is kids were coming in and asking for more than that. Is it that simple of an approach?
Well, I don't know, the flat rate and all of that. I can tell you anecdotally that players have come in and they come in and sit in Saban's office and ask for a raise. I'm not going to say he said no to all of them, but there's a starting guard down in Miami that asked for a raise and law school tuition for his girlfriend. And, and he was a starter. He was a 2-year starter, and he was kind of shown the door, and he's a starter down at Miami now. But yeah, I think under Saban, and we'll see how it evolves. But yeah, whatever they were getting, that there have been players that have asked for a raise, and some of the transfer. I know that player specifically. That's why he transferred. And guess what? He's a starting guard at Miami, and his girlfriend's in law school in Miami. So do the math. But
can you imagine that? Hey, coach, listen, the average NFL player career is like 3.5 to 4 years, and this girl's my meal ticket. I need you to take care of me. That's not even how I would see the conversation going. But I'm with you. At least that would have some sense to it. I think it was probably a little more heavy-handed. I start for your team. I'm better than the guy behind me. I need money, or I'm going to leave. I think it was more of my guess. I don't know, but my guess it was a little more not a collaborative conversation. That's funny.
Okay. Can you guys hear me now?